Story 1. From start to finish, she blamed everything on all her exes. She talked about how many men wanted her and that I'm lucky. There were more red flags than a Chinese military parade. Story 2. She opened the date by asking if I had a car and how much money I made before spending most of the rest of the date talking about her ex, who she was still actively messaging. Story 3. I've done it several times, but my favorite was when she catfished me. She was about 250 pounds heavier than any of her dating profile pictures. I was young and too polite to walk away at the time. She was incredibly sexually aggressive. She commented about other women in a very derogatory manner. Finally, when I said I wasn't interested in a second date, she called me the N-word with a hard R followed by a homophobic slur. I found the racism weird because we are both white. Story 4. I had a girl blatantly ask me to go back to her room and have sex right in front of a bunch of mutual friends. I was interested in a different girl there, so I just said no thanks in front of everyone. She then said, "Are you rejecting me? I don't get rejected." Then the girl I liked said, "That's kind of concerning name." She then proceeded to have a meltdown, saying, "It's not possible for me to assault because I have been assaulted." Needless to say, I think I made the right call. Story 5. Clearly stopped putting any effort in once she knew I was interested. Took me for granted like she had already crossed the finish line, etc. Her sense of disbelief was quite palpable when I refused to go any further. Story 6. I remember being tipsy and hitting on this guy. I was kind of over the top with my interest because of alcohol. He was a gentleman. He took my number but said he didn't make out with drunk women. I felt so embarrassed the next day. Never heard from him. It really taught me a lesson. I don't really drink much now. Looking back, I see how embarrassing I must have been. Story 7. Got the crazy vibe from her. Not my type. Married her. Not me. Coworker. Gossip too much. Lived too far away. Was drunk her. Not me. Already in a relationship. And lastly, I really liked them, but I knew I was just looking for some fun, and they would have been expecting something more meaningful. Story 8. I had a girl who was super into me way back when. She was attractive and generally nice, but was she extra? She would always talk to me about how she's waiting for her Prince Charming to swoop her away and take care of her, and that I seemed like a Prince Charming if there ever was one. I wasn't sure what she needed saving from. Her family lived in a 5,000+ square foot home and owned 2 or 3 horses for her to ride as she pleased. She also bought pretty hard into gender stereotypes, and all her interests were things that are typically girly. But I have never wanted someone I have to take care of or a trophy, or someone who defines themselves by gender-coded things. I rejected her quite a few times, each time I believe clearly expressing why I wasn't interested and likely never would be, and after each time she threatened to commit suicide. She would say she knew in her heart that we were destined to be together, and if she couldn't have me, there was no point in going on. So after the 3rd or 4th threat, I told her I am not the one to bear that burden, and we shouldn't be friends anymore if this is going to keep happening. She never killed herself, and after that last threat, I just only dealt with her when I had to. I don't know what happened to her after I moved away. I also had another girl later on who was more my type, and I was interested, but she was really ambitious, had her life together, and was going places. At that point in my life, I wasn't in a great place, and I didn't want to be a burden on her, so I turned her down for her sake. It was probably for the best, because I do know that she reached her goals and ended up with a guy who seems like a better match for her than I was. Story 9. She started getting righteous about how my kids were dressed for some holiday photos. They were girls aged 6 and 10 wearing dresses. It wasn't a complaint about the clothes so much as it was about me apparently pushing a heteronormative agenda. I'm like, they got dressed. I don't know what to tell you. Maybe go away? I can get attention elsewhere. Story 10. Married. Will not ever go there. Another time she was my ex. Will not ever go there either. The reasons they are your ex have not changed. Another time, a coworker. Absolutely no in my book. Another time, she was the sister of the girl I was dating. Story 11. Kind of rejected the same girl twice. It's a long story, but to shorten it, I had a crush on her, actually, but didn't think she was interested, so I didn't ask her out. Soon after, I met another girl who was into me, and I dated her. This girl turned out to be the most abusive person I have ever met. That relationship lasted a year, and by the end, I was way too traumatized to date anyone. Coincidentally, that's when the first girl confessed that she had a crush on me since the time I initially liked her and thought she missed her chance and wanted to try dating. We tried for a bit, but I was just too emotionally broken to really give love and affection after just getting out of an abusive relationship, so it fizzled out, and I was the one to break it off. The second time I rejected her was because I had begun to heal and felt like I did have feelings for her, and she may still have some for me. I was getting closer to her again, but then she started saying troubling things. Among them, she struggled a lot with severe mental health issues, extremely violent desires, and wild mood swings. This triggered my fight or flight since that's exactly how my ex was, and it was like a post-traumatic stress disorder response, but I basically went cold and distanced myself from her right there. Not her fault, but I've been with 2 abusive women in my life so far, and I literally cannot date another woman that may seem abusive. Loud and angry women literally activate my flight instincts, and I just immediately lose all interest. You could tell me the most attractive woman on the planet is into me, but the second she angrily yells at me, all my sexual and romantic interest in her would evaporate. Story 12. I hadn't really talked to her in a very personal way, and she passed me a note asking if I liked her or not, with a checkbox for each option at the bottom. It always seemed like the kind of thing I hoped would happen, but we were in 11th grade. It was odd at that age. I told her I wasn't looking for a girlfriend at the time. I ended up being roommates with her in our mid-20s with a mutual friend, despite not keeping up with her in between. She showed me her breasts in exchange to see my private part, her idea. They were nice, but that's all that happened. Weird story. Story 13. The vibe just wasn't there. Attraction isn't just looks. It's chemistry, compatibility, and timing. Sometimes it's better to be honest than force something that doesn't feel right. I think the reason for both is the same. Story 14. She had an ankle monitor. Oh, and I was married. My wife found it hilarious when I told her about being hit on. The first reason I rejected her was because of the ankle monitor, and the second was because I was married. She loves telling the story. Story 15. I saw her absolutely lose her temper on a phone call with her mom in public, just calling her all kinds of nasty things. No idea whether it was justified, but to do that in public and switch gears immediately after hanging up was the reddest of red flags to 19-year-old me. Story 16. She thought she was a vampire and was talking about cutting me up and drinking my blood. She lived in a different state. We also did not know each other that well, so I figured we would probably never meet in person anyway. I just brushed off her delusions and figured she would move on eventually. Then she showed up at my job a week later, and I had to stop it there. Someone who will jump on an 1,100-mile plane ride after knowing a guy for a month is too much for me, and I genuinely believe she needed professional help. Story 17. Her husband was still in the picture, albeit on the outs, and I could tell I was the poor bastard she intended to pick up the pieces. I've got my own issues to work through, but they don't involve anything that would make someone else feel like they're being used, and I just do not play that game. Story 18. Most men have rejected a woman. It is just whether or not it registered to them that they were rejecting her because it was not a woman they considered attractive. Story 19. Smoker, binge drinker, pothead, mental health issues, no empathy, no sense of humor, no accountability for their behavior, lacking femininity, having several kids from different fathers, and being obese were some of the reasons I've rejected women. Story 20. I don't need a relationship if you are just not what I'm looking for. Simple as that. Being alone is peaceful and better than being stuck with the wrong person. This may be cold, but if all you bring to my life is sex, I'd rather just be alone. Learned it the hard way. Story 21. I need to have romantic feelings and see a future together. Dating precedes courtship, which can lead to engagement, with the end goal being marriage and a minimum of 2 replacement mini versions of us to keep our genes going. Without that, you can be an acquaintance or friend with no sexual involvement, even though you may be physically attractive. Nothing more or less. Story 22. In 4th grade, a girl asked me to the dance, and I turned her down because I was interested in someone I had no chance with. I ended up not attending that dance or any others, Story 23. Strike 1. We were on a date and went to a bookstore, and she stole a random pair of glasses sitting on the front table. Strike 2. I had to ask her 3 times to take her shoes off on my bed. Strike 3. She started talking about this random time at a gym 3 years ago when the most muscular guy asked her out and how it made her feel so special. I put her on the couch in my living room for the night, and she called a taxi and went home. Story 24. My ex asked me to marry her. The answer is no because she is so intent on doing harm that I cannot recall her presence resulting in a positive outcome. It was a lesson learned, and she is looking for someone to take from, not enrich. I rejected a girl trying to make out with me because I was working and very broke. I refused to buy a drink for a girl. I suspect she and her friends were trying to get me to buy stuff on a business card so they could leverage it. I'm not sure if she was 21, but in this day and age, none of these people are interested in you at all. It's just a play. I turned down quite a few casual interactions because it's not all about sex. Of course, there are more. The rest were all rejected after trying to make up. Story 25. Too young. Too old. Zero feelings for her. Was rejected previously. Daddy issues. Difficult to handle mental or emotional issues. And the most often used one for the last 5 years. I'm taken. Story 26. I was 32. She was 44 and not very attractive. Everyone thought I turned her down because of her weight, which is not true at all. It was because of her age. I do not care to be in a relationship unless there is a strong likelihood for kids, and while it is not impossible to have a kid at 44 and older, it is far from a strong likelihood. Story 27. I didn't like them. One I just didn't connect with. Another looked kind of pale and flabby and talked like a hoodlum. Another 2, I think, were just emotionally damaged, and I didn't want to be involved with them. I just didn't like them. Story 28. She was just coming out of an abusive relationship and had some serious issues to work out. She was not ready for another relationship, and it would have been really toxic. I hope she is in a better place now, though. Story 29. She picked up stuff at a store and put it down elsewhere. I've never worked in retail, but it just annoys me that someone was so entitled. She asked if I was into open relationships. She said it's the man's responsibility to pay. She made fun of a couple we walked past. She refused to go see the original Gladiator movie with me. She said it wasn't her cup of tea, even though she knew it meant I was going alone. These things stand out as to why I rejected different women I went on dates with. Story 30. 15 years older than me, coworker, high-strung. Altogether not a great package. I love her as a coworker and a friend, but I have no interest in a relationship. Story 31. Maybe I attract these kinds of people, but here is a list. Mean, especially when things don't go her way. Boring. I should have known early on I was not doing well mentally at the time. The first time we had sex, she started talking about marriage and planning a life with me in it. I hadn't even had enough time to get dressed yet. When I let her down as gently as I could later, she lost her temper at me. Unhinged. She stalked me for a bit too. I was certain I was going to get stabbed in the dark at some point. There are plenty more, but they are not as interesting. Now I'm waiting it out until I find the right person with a significantly higher bar. Story 32. So I got a call from a roommate of my then friend with benefits, who kind of stole my number from my friend's phone. She wanted to hang out. I could see the potential for drama here, and to be honest, could hear the potential in her voice. I politely turned her down. Another time, a platonic lady friend of mine called me in the middle of the night asking for a ride home. I picked her up downtown at 1 a.m. On the drive home, she propositioned me multiple times. I got her home and in the care of her roommate. If she were sober, I'd be all for it, but she only ever came on to me when she was drunk or high. Story 33. She was extremely drunk and started taking off her clothes, throwing herself on me while not making a coherent sentence. Even worse, we were friends at the time, and she was very religious and said she wanted to wait until marriage. I got out of there really quickly. Story 34. Happened a lot when I was younger. Sorry, I have a girlfriend, was a common expression. Sometimes I got a shrug and an okay. Sometimes I got an I don't care and a sexual advance. Story 35. 1. She seemed kind of crazy, spent a fair bit of time making derogatory comments about men. Plus, she smoked weed, which, although fine in and of itself, is something I can't do, so it wouldn't have worked. We kissed at the end of the date, and I felt absolutely nothing. Story 36. Crazy. Randomly, when I was just chilling in class in 7th grade, the girl would just go up and hug me. I didn't know her very well and had talked to her a few times during the week. Creeped me out. She also seemed kind of bipolar and unstable. She asked me out and I immediately said no. Story 37. I'm not over what my ex did to me and would absolutely be a really terrible partner. At least at this point in my life. I hope I don't feel like this forever.